How's it going, everybody? Eric here from That's Wrestling, the podcast that avoids the WWE and actually watches wrestling that is enjoyable and you don't want to jump out of a window after viewing it. So today, I'm going to be going over All Out, the AEW pay-per-view that seems to be, it's going to be a annual occurrence, it seems, in Chicago over Labor Day weekend. It looks like they were going to be doing this on a yearly basis, so something to look forward to. This was a pretty long show, and hopefully this is just a once-a-year type of thing where they are going to be doing the longer show just at this time. I don't know how many shows people can take, if it's going to be 5 hours including the pre-show or 4 hours not including the pre-show. Also, it's going to be interesting going forward, especially when they get onto TV and whatnot, if their pay-per-view model is going to stand up when we're talking about things like, right now, New Japan is about $10 US, same with the WWE Network, though I have canceled that a long time ago, so I have not been watching or keeping up with WWE right now. Myself and this show is going to be focusing on AEW and New Japan, so that's what we're going to talk about. So, getting into it, the pre-show started out, and we find out that the commentators are going to be Excalibur and Golden Boy, which is a huge improvement over having Alex Marvez in there. I am just not a fan of Alex Marvez. He just didn't seem like he was comfortable doing what he was doing. And even in the promo videos leading up on YouTube, he was in one of them, and it sounded like he was uncomfortable doing that as well. I don't know. I just don't get the appeal of Alex Marvez at this point. So, I mean, that's just kind of how it is for me. But I am a big fan of how Golden Boy was doing the announcing at Fyter Fest, so I was hoping that this was going to happen at some point. You know, they did pick up Tony Schiavone, but I don't think you're gonna want to have two play-by-play guys with JR and Tony on the booth at the same time. So I didn't really expect them to add Tony instead of Golden Boy. So I'm a big fan that is going to be the lineup. I wouldn't have a problem if, say, JR did, say, the pay-per-views and Tony maybe did the weekly TV shows, or vice versa. Though we'll get into the announcement a little bit later when it comes to JR, but Golden Boy and Excalibur were on point tonight. So anyways, starting out on the pre-show, we had the 21-woman battle casino royale, or whatever you want to call it. It was to but put into the championship match for the women's title on the first AEW show on TNT on October 2nd. And starting right out of the gate, we had Nyla Rose, Leva Bates, Fabia Paci, and Priscilla Kelly, and so we had some interesting spots in here. Leva was got thrown over the top rope and was hanging by her feet, and Peter Avalon threw out some books, and she kind of did a book walk, so her feet wouldn't actually touch the floor. That was pretty interesting. But eventually, Nyla Rose threw everybody out eventually, and she was the lone woman standing going into the second wave. This is a very odd concept for how to do the battle royale. I think it really takes away from the individual competitors as they come out, because they don't get like their own entrance music. They get a group entrance, and all their names are called out at once. So it doesn't let you absorb what you're seeing. So I think the matches the layout is okay, but I rather have it a more, Royal Rumble type of format. I mean, they could shorten the times, they could do every 30 seconds or something like that. just to get the match underway and filled up quickly. So I mean, if you're doing 30 seconds, you're looking at less than 10 minutes to get everybody into the ring if you start off with 5 competitors right at the beginning or something like that. But yeah, so during the second wave, we had Penelope Ford, Britt Baker, Sadie Gibbs. They all came in. Interestingly enough, Britt Baker pulled Shazza McKenzie out of the ring by her jaw. I don't know if anybody really caught on to that she basically pulled her out by her teeth, if you will. So that was a very interesting spot. Later on, the next wave had the surprise entrance of Tennille Dashwood, which it sounds like she recently signed with Impact, but it sounds like it was not a exclusive contract. So she can still do dates with AEW. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes forward. Hopefully, she can work both. But I believe her Impact contract is actually not that long, so we'll see. Anyways, in that same group, Eva Lise came out, which was my pick for this Battle Royale, or at least who I wanted. I didn't think she was going to win, but at least I wanted to. I was a big fan of her in the Lucha Underground and all that, and she's a great wrestler, so I would love to see her at least higher up in the women's division when TV starts and whatnot. Also, Awesome Kong, Brandy, and B. Priestley entered at the same time. Something that happened during the match was there was a triple team on Awesome Kong, leaving Rose and Brandy alone. They had some beef from previous shows, like Double or Nothing, when she added Awesome Kong to that match back at Double or Nothing. And amazingly, Brandy ended up getting the better of Rose and actually gave her a stunner. And then right after that, Kong eliminated both Dashwood and Eva Lise. So both of the more recognizable names, or especially Dashwood being the former Emma in WWE, were both eliminated relatively quick. And then we had Allie, Teal Piper, and then a surprise entrance of ODB with her signature flask coming down to the ring, which was very interesting. I have not seen her in a very long time because I have not been watching Impact, so I don't even know what she was doing. Like I didn't even know she was still wrestling anymore or what. So, and I really haven't even looked into it or anything. So that is interesting. We also had Jazz sporting a bald head and Nikki Savoy. Savoy ended up doing a massive, or at least a very high speed between the ropes dive, taking out 4 of the ladies who are still on the outside. She gets back into the ring, and then Rose eliminates her. And then there is a standoff between Rose, Kong, Jazz, and ODB, and a huge ODB chant breaks out, which was pretty interesting. And then Kong and Jazz get tossed, and then the Joker card, being the last woman to enter the Casino Royale, was Mercedes Martinez. She enters last. She starts taking out everyone. She ends up suplexing Rose. And then Allie gives a Death Valley driver to Martinez. And then Sadie Gibbs gets in a few spots, but ends up getting tossed. Baker, Martinez, Priestley, and Rose end up the final 4. Baker gives a wicked sling blade that looks so much better than Finn Balor's. Finn Balor's sling blade always looks loose, whereas this sling blade was very tight. Same with like Tanahashi, his sling blade is nice too. I'm just not a fan of Finn Balor's. It just does not look right. And then Baker and Martinez are out on the apron. There's a sequence that goes on. In the end, Martinez gets super kicked and eliminated. So we got Baker, Priestley, and Rose being the final 3. Baker, Priestley team up on Rose, trying to get rid of her. Baker then gives a Canadian destroyer to Bea Priestley, which was awesome. But since she's dead weight, she can't pick her up and throw her out. Baker and Rose go at it a little bit. Baker suplexes Rose in the middle of the ring and then goes back to Priestley and eventually gets her out of the ring. She gets her on the ring apron, gives her a wicked forearm, and then she goes to the floor. But she has her arm, Baker that is, hanging over the top rope, and Priestley grabs it and starts pulling her, like trying to pull her over the top rope, and Nyla Rose comes up behind her and finishes her off by dumping her out of the ring. So the winner of the Women's Casino Royale match is Nyla Rose, and she's going to be going on to the championship match in October. So overall, I mean, this match was all right. The crowd were into various spots, but it wasn't a massive thing. But again, I'm not a huge fan of this format. It doesn't breathe enough. And especially when we're talking about that a championship match is on the line, you figure this is essentially a number one contenders battle royale. You figure there'd be a little bit more prestige to it, or it just didn't feel as big as it should have given the stakes. So the next match on the pre-show, it was just 2 matches on the pre-show. The next one was Jack Evans and Angelico versus Private Party. This match was announced as one fall 15-minute time limit, which I thought was kind of funny. That Excalibur said it was a 20-minute match, and he said that when Justin Roberts called out that 5 minutes have elapsed and 10 were remaining. So if you just do the math right there, that's 15 minutes, but Excalibur said 20, which is not correct. Anyways, both teams both teams are pretty high flyers. They do a lot of ranas and dives and all that fun stuff. Both the teams are showboating a bit, taunting each other. We got some nice lucha-style wrestling going on with some striking. And then going into the end, not really not a whole lot of super important things happened. It was just kind of a back-and-forth lucha style with some nice striking in there. And at the end, Evans is kind of stuck in the second and third rope. He's sitting on the second rope, holding the third rope, sitting in the corner. And then he gets a poison rana and then a second poison rana while Angelico is up on the top rope in the opposite corner. They give him their finisher is called the Gin and Juice, which is basically a rana into a cutter, and Private Party wins that one. After the match, the teams are shaking hands and everything, but then Evans and Angelico start beating up Private Party. So it looks like Angelico and Jack Evans are going to be heels in this promotion, so we'll see how that goes. A very interesting chant came out, which the crowd was chanting "Party Poopers" after that, so that was pretty funny. Overall, this match was what it was. It was just pretty much a lucha style match with some striking in there. Nothing really huge happened. So that was the end of the pre-show. Then we go into the main card proper. JR comes out, so that is going to be the announced team for the pay-per-view, joining Golden Boy and Excalibur. So there are a few, I'll definitely talk about a few things that came up during the announcing when it comes to JR in matches coming up. But the first match on the main card was SCU versus Jurassic Express, or at least that's what the title called them, even though it was not announced as such by Justin Roberts when they came out. So it's Luchasaurus, Jungle Boy, and Marco Stunt. JR keeps calling Jungle Boy Jungle Jack or Jungle Jack Perry or anything like that, while Excalibur and Golden Boy are constantly saying Jungle Boy. So it was very interesting when JR can't keep the name straight. And this is kind of a thing that we've seen in the past where JR doesn't seem to be as fully immersed in the product as you would hope, and it shows in a few things. And then there's a few matches where you can tell he's not a fan about what's going on, so he seems disinterested with the matches. So anyways, Jungle Boy and Kazarian start out. We've got some nice chain wrestling going on. Both teams are like super over, and both teams are working a babyface for the most part. SCU has some slight heel tendencies here and there, but nothing like super. They're just kind of taking advantage at a few points, but it's not like dastardly heel type stuff. Luchasaurus is super over with the crowd, especially when he gets the hot tag. The place just goes nuts. Anyways, Marco runs around, does a little bit of Fortnite dancing, which was kind of funny, or doing the Charleston or whatever that is. Marco and Jungle Boy then do a dive onto some members of SCU, and then Luchasaurus is in the ring by himself. Everybody's out on the outside, hanging out by the ramp, and then he does a dive as well. He kind of does a run and then jumps onto the second rope and then flips over the top, and he gets a massive pop. Then later on in the match, Luchasaurus gets a hot tag and hits an awesome sequence, just pretty much kicking everybody and ducking out of the way of shots and doing very athletic maneuvers. And basically, everyone does a bunch of more dives to the outside, which this is kind of a running theme in this show, is there seems to be way too many dives going on. And then, like, dives are fine, but a lot of the time the setup gets so obvious, and that the people who are on the outside just look like schmucks standing there watching the person run across the ring and then run back towards them, and then they just stand there and wait for them to get jumped on. So a lot of times it really makes no sense, and it really bugs me. Sometimes there's, the dives, you can't predict them coming. There isn't like a huge setup for anything like that, or the persons or people on the outside are not just sitting there in a group holding each other, putting their arms around each other's shoulders and, pretending to be hurt or whatever. It just goes a little overboard sometimes. Anyways, at the end here, SCU gets both Marco and Jungle Boy up into the best Meltzer ever, and they pin Jungle Boy for the win. Something interesting that happened was right after the pin, Christopher Daniels is checking on Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy to make sure they're okay. They have the sportsmanship going on and everything. You think something's going to happen. The teams shake hands, no turn or anything like that. There's a few teased turns that don't actually happen, so they are taking some of the tropes that get used, but stopping before actually going through with it. So you don't know what's going to happen, and considering that Angelico and Jack Evans kind of did a turn just like it during the pre-show, it's probably unlikely that they are going to do more than one turn like that during this show. So anyways, moving on to the fourth match of the evening. This was probably one of the more anticipated matches, even though the build-up was pretty light, given that Kenny Omega was supposed to face Jon Moxley, whereas Jon Moxley currently has a staph infection in his arm, so he could not wrestle. I do not know currently what the state of his health is, if he had surgery or anything like that. But anyways, the replacement was Pac, and everybody was calling him Pac, but on the announcements and the announcers were calling him Pac, so I'm guessing that is the correct way to say it. I think everybody got A little confused with X-Pac spelling his name P-A-C as well. So it seems to be Pac. Anyways, starting out right at the beginning, the match starts out a bit of tit for tat. Omega goes for the Crusher, but Pac flips right out of it, which was very cool move. I have not seen anybody do that before. It was pretty awesome. Omega goes for a crossbody over the top, but Pac kicks him in the gut while he's on the outside. They get a bit of brawling out on the outside. After getting back into the ring, Omega goes for a suicide dive, and his ankles end up smashing the barricade. So one thing that I noticed during this show is how close the barricades are to the ring compared to other promotions that have a bit more space. And that will come into play a couple times in some other matches as well, but especially this one. So this dive that Omega did wasn't so bad. He kind of just tapped his ankles on the top of the barricade. But later on, Pac really racks his shins across the barricade when he does a moonsault to the outside. And I don't know if they just need to add some more space between the ring and the barricade, but it is very close, or people just need to either move their dives over to the ramp. But if you do that, I think that goes back into the problem that I was talking about earlier, that the dives get way too predictable when people are hanging out over by the ramp. It's like, oh, somebody's going to do a dive or something like that. When those can happen at all four sides of the ring, then it becomes a little less predictable. But in this case, I think they should just give a little bit more room between the ring and the barricade, because if Pac wasn't wearing kick pads, that would have been really bad, and he would have some massive bruises because he really racked his shins across the top of the barricade. So it's definitely something that I think they need to reevaluate their setup a little bit and maybe add a little bit more room around the ring. Anyways, both of them get back into the ring. They have a bit of boo-yay exchanges with some chops and some elbows and some punches. Eventually, Omega gets in a bunch of high-impact moves. He does a push kick of Pac into the corner, and then Pac comes out, and then Omega gives him a buckle bomb and then a spine buster. He goes for the V-trigger, but Pac pulls the ref in front of him, so Omega stops, and then Pac goes to the top for a crossbody, and Omega hits him with a drop kick right out of the air, and then finally gets in his first V-trigger. Then there's a bunch of back and forth between the two of them, exchanges in the ring, and going into the finish. So it looks like the finish was supposed to be Omega goes for a Poison Rana, but overshoots Pac and gets in front of him, and then Pac was going to give a Poison Rana to Omega. So that basically happened. So Omega went for the Poison Rana, jumped onto Pac's shoulders, and then Pac shrugged him off in front of him, and then Pac went for the Poison Rana, but did not get the height needed to fully land on Omega's shoulders, and he basically fell off while Omega was trying to get a hold of his legs, because when they do a Poison Rana, the person taking it kind of grasps onto the person's legs around their ankles so they can use some of the momentum to flip him backwards. But he still ended up flipping himself, even though there was no lock on the legs. So it was a little bit sloppy. Unfortunately, they botched that kind of finish right there. Anyways, Omega gets up, gets Pac into the one-wing angel position, but then Pac kind of moves down his shoulders a little bit, locks Omega into the brutalizer, And then Omega ends up passing out. And for the win, we have Pac right there. Very interesting when it comes to deciding who would go over in this match. I was not sure how they were going to go. There was a lot of speculation. People thought it was going to be Omega because he's been on a bit of a losing streak as far as AEW goes. And this being Pac's first match, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to beat him on his first match? So it really depends how they're going to play this out in the future. Was this the right call? As far as I'm concerned, I think they did the right thing by having Pac win his first match in, because Omega was already on a losing streak, and it's not going to hurt Omega that much to go on a losing streak right out of the gate, because he is so over, and he's going to get over with how good of a wrestler he is anyways. So if they want to have Pac in title contention or playing in the upper card, this is probably the way to go. I think Omega can kind of go on a little bit of a journey here with taking these losses and then coming back in the future to get back up into the main event scene. So now after that, we move into the Cracker Barrel Clash, I believe is what they called it. It was basically a hardcore match with Jimmy Havoc, Darby Allin, and Joey Janela. They've done a few of these matches now on their cards. These kind of hardcore matches, I guess you can call them trash wrestling matches or whatever you want to call them. It's really just kind of a stunt show, or how much can we try to hurt ourselves type of match. I don't know what the future holds for these types of matches. I don't think they're going to be doing them on a regular basis, and I think it's just because they haven't had TV that they've resorted to these kind of matches for their specials. They're on BR Live as well as the pay-per-view here on All Out and whatnot. So I guess we'll see. Having hardcore matches or these types of matches is not a huge deal, but I wouldn't do it too often, and I don't know why they bothered to do a match with this type of stipulation when there's really no story need for it other than, hey, these are three guys who like to have these matches, let's just do it type of thing. There was nothing really on the line, and there was really no hype buildup in general for this particular match. So I'm not even really sure why they bothered doing, but as far as this type of match goes, it was actually a pretty good match. It was pretty entertaining, and there were some very interesting spots, and these guys kind of put themselves through a bit of hell. I've seen worse, obviously, but this was still a pretty crazy match. Right out of the gate, Havoc goes straight out to the outside, goes searching around underneath the ring, and pulls out a staple gun, and he ends up stapling himself just to show how serious he is, and he gets a USIC F chant from the crowd, and going from there, Havoc gets taped down to a chair by Allin and Janela, and Darby Allin pulls out a cup and starts shaking it, and it's full of tacks, and basically they pour the tacks into Jimmy Havoc's mouth, and then they end up taping his mouth shut as well while he's taped to this chair. Allin and Janela go back and forth a little bit, and Darby Allin ends up getting up onto the top rope, and he was going to dive back into the ring onto Janela, but he sees Jimmy Havoc still sitting in the chair on the outside, and Jimmy Havoc is like taunting him on to like, come jump on me, and he ends up diving over the ring post onto Jimmy Havoc, who's on the outside still in the chair, and then he takes the tape off and spits out a bunch of thumbtacks. So that was that. Later on in the match, there were two Cracker Barrels, actual barrels, at ringside. I believe Jimmy Havoc at one point hit Darby Allin with a tray full of biscuits, and then so they move the ring steps kind of towards the ramp This is Darby Allin and Jimmy Havoc are on the outside fighting. They move the ring steps over towards the ramp. Darby Allin ends up setting up Jimmy Havoc on the ring stairs, and Darby Allin grabs one of the Cracker Barrels and climbs up to the top rope, and then holds the barrel behind him and does a coffin drop onto the ring stairs because Jimmy Havoc moves out of the way. So he does a coffin drop onto the barrel, onto the ring stairs, and the barrel like explodes. It was obviously a rigged barrel. It wasn't a legit barrel with metal straps or anything. It looked more like it is made out of definitely lighter wood. It kind of looked more like a balsa wood type of material, and the rings that would normally be like steel rings were probably just like some sort of duct tape or something. So they're obviously gimmicked and much lighter, but it was still a insane drop to take to do the coffin drop off the top rope onto the ring stairs, which were on the floor. And it's obviously just the lower segment of the ring stairs. So, that's a pretty far drop, and then crashing onto like that gimmicked barrel. So that was pretty interesting. Another point in the match, Janela is in the ring, and Darby Allin pulls out a skateboard from underneath the ring. On the bottom of the skateboard is a ton of tacks. He climbs up to the top rope and then basically does a drop-in ollie onto Joey Janela's back and gets a ton of tacks stuck into him. That was an interesting spot. I don't think I've ever seen that one before. And then Jimmy Havoc and Joey Janela at one point were fighting in the ring. A chair gets pulled out, and Joey Janela gets sat in the chair at one point, and then Jimmy Havoc goes and does a monkey flip to him, and he flips with the chair and lands still sitting in the chair. And he sits there and kind of gestures to the crowd, like, "Hey, look at what I did," and smile to the crowd. And then they move on from there. And basically the finish of the match was Jimmy Havoc brought in, actually I'm not sure which one. It was either Havoc or Janela. Either way, a barrel got brought into the middle of the ring, and Janela gets perched up onto the top rope, and then Havoc gives him a suplex, and the barrel was just not close enough to the corner, so basically it was just Janela's leg that ended up hitting the barrel and breaking a hole into the barrel. So just to get things completed, Havoc gives Janela an acid rainmaker onto the barrel, and then he pins him right there. So an interesting match to say the least. And like I said, I hope they don't overdo this type of match, and I hope it's just because they've only had like specials or pay-per-views or whatever, and that's the reason why they've done these. And in the future, if they do these types of matches, I much rather them have some sort of storyline, meaning some sort of blood feud type of deal to make this sort of stipulation mean something or make sense. And it's not just because these three guys like to go out and have these types of matches. So that was the fifth match on the card, including the pre-show matches. And then the sixth match is kind of where this card starts to fall apart a little bit. The match was the Best Friends and the Dark Order, and really the crowd kind of fell asleep in this one. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I really don't understand the Dark Order, and I have not seen them previously as the Super Smash Brothers. So I am not really familiar with their work. So if I'm not familiar with it, a lot of fans are probably not familiar with it. And this gimmick is just not working with these creepers coming out, their sidekicks or whatever. It really makes no sense. I don't understand what the point is, what's going on. At one point, the crowd gives them a creepy perverts chant, and JR makes a joke saying that he should totally, they should totally make a T-shirt out of that. So that was kind of funny. And what else happened? So really, the crowd pretty much only popped when Beretta and Chucky T did their usual hug spot. And then after the match is actually when the most exciting thing of the match happened, is the Creepers start taking Beretta towards the back, and then the lights go out. And then when the lights come back on, Orange Cassidy is there standing in the ring, hands in his pocket. The crowd pops huge. And then he does a running dive onto all the Creepers, still hands in his pockets. His hands never left his pockets. He does the dive outside, and then he jumps back into the ring, does a kip up, hands still in his pockets the whole time. Just the I don't care type of expression that he always has. And then Chucky T and Beretta jump into the ring and hug Orange Cassidy, and Cassidy continues to no-sell the whole thing. So that was actually the high point of the match, was after the match. So I don't know what they're going to be doing with this Dark Order. I don't think it's getting over. I don't understand it, and the crowd doesn't really seem to be in it either, especially when they come up with the creepy perverts chant. I don't think they're into them at all, or even really care. So this match was kind of a little bit of a letdown as far as the match went. And then, the crowd was kind of really out of it as well. And at this point, I think this is kind of where the card, they might have needed to rearrange the card a little bit. And that also comes up into the rest of the matches, that I think the order needed to be changed up just a bit, just because of how the reactions come up with the subsequent matches coming up. So the 7th match was Riho versus Shida, and whoever won that match is going on to face Nyla Rose at the TV taping, or the TV on TNT, on October 2nd. So the first week on TV, they're going to have the women's championship match. Really, the crowd was pretty dead for this match. Maybe at the end, they got up a little, the crowd kind of got into it a bit. I mean, it was a serviceable match. There was nothing overly special. Riho is really good. I really like her selling, and man, she got put into a few submission holds that it looked like she was going to snap in half. She was like folded over. Her biggest spots were she hit a few stomps in a few different places. Shida was hung up in the ropes, or on the turnbuckle, and she gave her a stomp off the top rope from there. At one point, Shida was also out on the apron. Same thing, gave her a stomp. She basically gave her double stomp at a few different points in the match. But really, it was just kind of a, the crowd wasn't. It was a serviceable match. It was fine. I think the place on the card was more the problem than the actual match itself. But another thing that was a little bit lacking in this was there was really no story going into this match. I don't remember really anything on any of the YouTube videos leading up to All Out. And it really makes no sense. Okay, why do these two get a one-on-one match to decide who goes to the women's title match versus whoever wins the Battle Royale? I don't know why they get the one-on-one when everybody else has to go through. So that one wasn't really explained either. So I think part of the dead crowd was there just wasn't really any story behind it, and people didn't know why they were buying into it. So in the end, Riho won that, and now she's going to be facing Nyla Rose on October 2nd on the first TV show, the first AEW on TNT. So that's going to be a very interesting contrast, considering that Rose is more than double the weight of Riho. So it's going to be a huge clash right there, and we'll see how it goes. I'm not sure the outcome on that. It could be Riho comes up with some sort of way to overwhelm Rose, given the size differential. So I guess it's something to look forward to on October 2nd. We can see how that plays out. Moving on to the 8th match in the card. This is a 10-match card total, including the pre-show. So the 8th match was Cody versus Shawn Spears, and I think this is one of the matches that was hyped up the most running up to the show. They were in a few different of the YouTube videos running up to the show and really kind of had the most exposure, especially with Tully getting involved at one point in Shawn Spears' corner. They had the contract signing and all that. So that was all on the videos leading up to the show, and I think they really got the most play for anything. So starting off, one of the things that you've probably heard at this point already is that Cody's dog, Pharaoh, was brought out and the pyro went off, and it looked like that dog did not want to be there. The dog was trying to run back down the tunnel, and yeah, this is kind of one of those things where the dog isn't trained to be a performer and all that in front of such a huge crowd. It's probably time to leave the dog backstage. And really, it could have been as simple enough as seeing that the dog didn't want to be there, hand him off to a stagehand, let the stagehand bring him back, bring him to the back, and everything would be fine. But Diamond Dallas Page was with them, and MJF and Brandy, and they just kind of forced the dog to come down to the ring. So that's one of the things that came out about this. Just leave the dog backstage. Something about this was the entrance was just kind of hokey, where Brandy and MJF and Diamond Dallas Page were all dressed up with like Star Trek themed outfits. It was kind of really corny. Eventually they get down to the ring, and Cody chooses MJF to stay in his corner. As one of the stipulations for the match was only one person could be in each of the competitors' corners, as Tully was already in Shawn Spears. So basically, right before the bell even rang, Cody runs through, attacks Spears. They brawl on the outside. They brawl through the crowd a little bit. Eventually, the bell rings once they get back to the ring. Tully starts to get involved, causing problems for Cody, and MJF is basically useless. Or he does really stupid stuff that costs Cody in various ways. He distracts the ref, and then, which means Tully and Spears can do whatever. Eventually, Spear hits a low blow on Cody while they're on the outside, and all this. So it's how MJF is playing this whole thing. You can't really tell if he's actually trying to help Cody or hurt Cody, like he's going to turn against Cody or anything like that. There's a lot of teases throughout this whole match. You don't know which way MJF is going to go. Eventually, at one point, Spears takes off Cody's weight belt, but Earl Hebner sees it, and him and Spears have a bit of an exchange. Hebner ends up taking the weight belt and handing it off, and while his back is turned, Tully actually passes his belt to Spears, and then Spears gets in a bunch of shots onto Cody, but Cody starts to fire up after one of them, and then he ends up actually hitting an os cutter. I don't think anybody's actually noticed that's what it was. It was an os cutter. He jumped, basically he did the springboard off the second rope back into a cutter. That's exactly what the os cutter is. So I don't think anybody actually noticed that that is what Cody ended up using. Cody applies the figure 4 and ends up getting reverse. And this again, MJF distracts the ref, which then Tully can reach in and pull Shawn Spears to so-called, they say it increases the pressure or whatever. So he's helping him out. Eventually, the action moves back out to the outside and towards the ramp, and Spears ends up giving Cody a Death Valley driver on the ramp. As the count is going, the 10 count is started by Earl Hebner. Cody's on the outside, and MJF, is trying to get Cody back into the ring. He ends up like dragging Cody towards the ring, and then starts trying to pump him up, like, you got to get back in the ring, and stuff like that. And then finally he gets in the back into the ring, so he doesn't get counted out. Cody then hits the crossroads, and then Tully distracts the ref. So he pretty much had the match won. MJF jumps up onto the ring apron. Tully jumps up onto the ring apron, and they are, egging each other on. They're yelling at each other across the ring. Both of them get into the ring. MJF takes off his shirt. They go toe-to-toe with each other, and then they start choking each other, which was pretty funny. And then Spears actually kicks MJF, sends him to the outside. Tully goes onto the outside and then starts beating on MJF. And while all this is happening and the ref is distracted by Tully and MJF on the outside, out comes Arn Anderson. And the pop was massive. Arn Anderson comes down to the ring and gives Spears a spine buster. Tully can't believe it. He can't believe what's going on, and he kind of follows Anderson up the ramp, and he leaves. Though they left out of separate tunnels, which makes no sense. You would think that Tully should be going after Arn and not just going backstage and leaving his guy out in the ring. So that really made no sense. He should have gone down the same tunnel as Arn. So how they had the stage set up, they had two tunnels. So, competitors each would come out of one. So yeah, it really made no sense. I don't know why Tully, it just looks like he left Shawn Spears in the ring because he doesn't go after Arn down the same tunnel. He leaves by the other one. So just something that kind of really bothered me when I saw it. It just really made no sense of why he would do that. Anyways, Spears ends up pulling out a chair from underneath the ring. Call back to him hitting Cody at Fyter Fest, I believe. Yes, it was at Fyter Fest. And Cody attacks Shawn Spears before he can actually do anything with it. He drops the chair. Cody ends up picking up, looking at it, thinking he's going to use it. He tosses the chair to Spears and then does a disaster kick into the chair, into Spears' face, and then he ends up hitting the crossroads for the win. So this was actually a really good match. There was a lot of nice story told with MJF kind of being sort of useless, Tully getting involved, and then Arn Anderson coming down and helping out Cody and giving Spears a spine buster. And then after the match, MJF gets into the ring while Cody is celebrating, and he ends up picking up the chair, and Cody's back is turned. And then Cody turns around and sees MJF holding the chair, and MJF kind of gives he plays it off like, I wasn't going to do anything. Actually, the expression was more like, can you believe this guy brought a chair into the ring? And then he tosses it down. So, that's another place where it teased, like, okay, is MJF going to go after Cody? Or was he purposely messing up throughout this match, causing Cody issues? Or is he really trying to be Cody's friend and help him out? It's really vague. So I'm assuming at some point, given MJF is supposed to be the heel and Cody is kind of playing a tweener at this point, that I'm guessing MJF eventually is going to turn, and this just might be using the tropes of turns in wrestling and then not going through with it. So I think that might be what it is. It's just a tease, and will we see it before TV starts, when TV starts, or are we going to see it in 2 months from now? I'm not sure. Just something to look out for. If MJF is genuine helping out Cody, or is he jealous of Cody some way, and that comes out to pass at some point. So just something to look for going forward in that storyline. Then going on to match number 9. Now, this is one of the matches that the placement gets questioned, especially after the end of the show. I'll talk about it a little more when I'm through with this. So, this match is the ladder match between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros. This is for the AAA tag titles, and really these are 4 guys that are completely insane, and wow. You worry about what's going to happen during this match, and you hope all of them make it out alive. So, to start off, yes, everybody made it out okay. So we'll start from there. All right, so right at the beginning of the match, actually, even during the entrances, the Young Bucks come out. They're wearing these lucha masks with some deer horns or moose horns, whatever you want to call them, on them. They come down to the match. Actually, during one of the videos leading up to the show on YouTube, they make fun of the catchphrase from the Lucha Bros, Zero Mado. I don't even know how it's said. The No Fear, and then they instead come up with Zero Huevos. So basically, at the beginning of the match, they go back and forth, and then the crowd, chants along with them, and then eventually, to kick everything off, Nick. I only saw Nick, but I think Matt might have too. Nick spits his gum at Penta, and then basically it's a brawl for all at that point. They brawl, the Bucks get thrown to the outside, and then the Bros go for a dive, but the Bucks throw the ladder that was on the outside at them. And then after that, Phoenix does a leapfrog dive over Penta onto the Young Bucks. And then throughout this whole match, there was a bunch of times where they basically did mirroring spots. So they kind of paired up older brother to older brother and younger brother to younger brother. So at one point you have, I'm not sure which ones were where, but I believe it was Matt and Penta were on the ladder going towards the belts, and then from the side, Phoenix and Nick both they roll in and hit the opposite brothers with cutters off the ladder, and then the brothers, I believe it was, I believe it was Phoenix and Nick ended up out on the apron. There are 2 tables set up, and then Matt and Penta look at each other, and then both of them hit running spears on the opposite brothers through the tables out to the floor, and then Matt gets Ray into the ring. He ends up hitting 4 Northern Light suplexes. The last one's on a ladder that's set up over in the corner. At one point, the ladder gets draped on the bottom rope. Nick gets Rana'd off the top rope and onto the ladder, though it was more that kind of his thigh down hit the ladder. He didn't really land on it solid. The Lucha Bros have a bunch of springboard moves that they do. Penta and Matt meet on the ladder at one point. Penta hits Matt with a crazy sling blade while they're both on the ladder, so he ends up giving Matt, he kind of goes around the edge of the ladder and ends up giving Matt a sling blade off the ladder. Nick does a dive through the ladder that's set up next to the rope, so he basically dives between the brace and the upper part of the ladder, through that, over the rope, onto the Lucha Bros who are on the outside. Phoenix hits Matt with a destroyer through a ladder. It's just completely insane. And then Phoenix sets up a ladder and a table in the ring, and then Matt goes to suplex Phoenix off the ladder onto that table, and then Penta kind of climbs up behind Phoenix and ends up giving Matt a destroyer off the ladder through the table. It is one of the craziest spots I have ever seen. Luckily, they were both okay. Matt was all right. Nick puts Penta on a table on the outside. Ray ends up putting Matt on a table on the outside on the opposite side. And they're basically set up mirrored once again. They climb up the ladders, look at each other, and then do splashes off the ladders through the tables with the opposite brothers on the tables. Ray then puts a ladder up between the barricade and ring. That's going to come in to use later. Nick ends up setting 2 tables up on the ramp side of the ring. Nick wraps Penta in a sharpshooter eventually, and then they kind of put the bottom rung of the ladder over his back, and then Matt gets in there and starts giving him a crossface as well to try to soften him up. Matt sets the Meltzer driver up with Nick, who's on the ladder, and then Penta actually breaks it up by pushing the ladder over, and Nick crashes through the tables that he set up over on the outside next to the ramp. But the thing is, the ladder wasn't close enough to the ropes, so Nick didn't completely clear the ropes, and his feet actually got caught up on the top rope, which then ended up flipping him over, and he ended up going pretty much head first through the table, and he only made it through one of the tables. It looked like his head hit the edge of the second table. So he hit the one closest to the ring and the one farthest from the ring. It looked like he smacked his head right on the edge of that table. It was pretty brutal, but I guess in the end he's all right. Matt and Penta get back into the ring onto a ladder. They're fighting on the ladder, and then Matt actually pulls off Penta's mask, and that gets a huge boo from the audience and everything. Penta jumps down, covering his face, and then while covering his face, he pushes the ladder over, and Matt ends up, so the ladder falls out from underneath Matt, and then Matt actually falls onto that cross brace that holds the ladder open. It looked horrible. It looked like it hurt like hell because that was crazy. Eventually, Penta gets his mask back on, and that ladder that was set up on the outside between the ring and the barricade, Penta sets Matt up into the package pile driver position, and then Ray from the top rope stomps him. So it's kind of like a package pile driver kind of Meltzer type deal. And then Ray sets up the ladder, and the Lucha Brothers climb up to the top and pull down the titles, and they remain the AAA tag title holders. A couple things in this match to call out, or really one thing was, I don't know why, but I love watching refs during matches too. Especially these types of matches, because there are a bunch of them. I think there are at least 3 refs on the outside, and just watching them corral broken tables, ladders, it's something that goes unseen, but a lot of what the refs did really helped move the match along. So the competitors weren't the ones clearing out broken tables and stuff like that. Also, when Nick and Ray went up onto the ladders to do the splashes onto the tables on the outside, on both sides, you could see the refs holding the ladders so the ladders wouldn't fall over. So that, they're providing some bracing. They're kind of like the unsung heroes, and obviously they are trying to stay unnoticed, but people are going to notice them. At least I notice, because it's something very interesting. It's something I find very interesting what refs do during these types of matches. So after the match completes, a couple of masked men come out in hoodies, and they look like they're wearing, I don't know, some sort of presidential Halloween masks. I'm not sure what presidents they were supposed to be. Anyways, they come out, they give Nick a neckbreaker power bomb, and start beating up on the Lucha Bros as well. And then it's revealed that it's Santana and Ortiz as they unmask. So LAX has signed with AEW. So but it looks like they're not going to be called LAX, and they're just going to be called Santana and Ortiz, or at least that is what's being reported at this point. All right, moving on to the final match, and this is going to be a match to crown the first AEW World Champion. So this is the match between Chris Jericho and Hangman Adam Page. Page comes out on a horse, which was pretty funny. And you can see that his mom and dad and his wife are at ringside. They'll come into play in a little bit. I noticed before they even said anything that Aubrey Edwards was going to be the ref for the match, which I think is great. From what I've seen of her in the other shows, for Double or Nothing, Fight for the Fallen, Fighter Fest, she's a really good ref, and sometimes she can bring a little extra to the match. So anyways, I noticed that before they ended up saying it, and then of course the announcers go in talking about that she's going to be the first woman ref for a world title match or anything like that. Wasn't a big deal. I mean, I noticed it before they even said anything like that, and it was perfectly fine. Anyways, so out of the gate, Page comes out pretty strong. The beginning of the match was pretty much straightforward brawling. Jericho ends up getting flipped to the outside of the ring. He was trying to give Page a Walls of Jericho, and he powered out of it. Jericho gets flipped outside of the ring right there. And Page gets up, and he does a high-speed dive to the outside. And this is going to be the side opposite the ramp. And he slams Jericho right into the barricade. This was a very high-speed dive. He was booking it. Anyways, back into the ring. The fighting goes on, continuing the brawling style in the ring. Jericho tossed to the outside once again, and Page goes for a shooting star press off the apron to the floor onto Jericho, but Jericho basically gives him a code breaker. He basically gets his knee. He was standing already, so he basically goes into a code breaker, throwing up his knees. Though it was a bit late if you actually watched it, and it looks like Page actually landed pretty hard onto Jericho's body, on his torso. Did not look very fun. Jericho drags Page over in front of his wife and parents, starts beating him up over there. He pulls the covering off of one of the barricades and wraps his arm around it and starts pulling on it, like trying to break his arm around the post. Eventually, actually at one point, Jericho even hit Page in the forehead with the announcer's microphone. So that was pretty interesting, and that's where JR mentioned that Jericho's skirting the rules a little close right here, and he's surprised he's gonna risk getting disqualified. Anyways, back into the ring. Actually, at that point as well, Jericho starts ringing the bell. That he's the best, and he starts ringing the bell, and that the match is over and he's won. Obviously he wasn't. Finally they get back into the ring. Jericho showboats a little bit, jumps up onto the corner, sit lounging in the corner. Then they get a little back and forth. Page eventually hits Jericho with the discus forearm, and Jericho gets busted open over the eye, the left eye, which is the same eye that he busted open on Page back at Fight for the Fallen when he posed as a creeper and then came in and beat Page up after his match there. Page is outside on the ring apron, and Jericho goes to do his springboard drop kick type of move, and Page ends up actually hitting him with a super kick. And then he does the buckshot lariat. A little bit of back and forth right there. Jericho and Aubrey get into it a little bit. She gives it right back. And I think it was really funny because so they're arguing. And she's like, "Get back to the match." It was pretty funny. Jericho gets dumped to the outside, and then Hangman hits a moonsault, but he ends up kind of slamming onto the ramp as well. He starts selling his leg a bit. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or not. I don't think it was. I think he was just selling because you could hear it when he slammed onto the ramp. Anyways, Page gets Jericho back into the ring, goes for a buckshot, but Jericho ends up hitting him with the code breaker. And then they go back and forth a little bit, and then Page ends up hitting Jericho with the Deadeyes pile driver. But Jericho ends up kicking out, and Aubrey's expression was priceless. She looked like, I can't believe this match is still going on. It was something else. And so from there, Page hits another buckshot, and they're jostling for position a little bit, and then Jericho hits the Judas effect, and you can see the whole crowd in the background stand up because they realize what just happened. Jericho for the win. He is the first AEW World Champion, and I can't believe that Jericho has got this back elbow over. I think it's kind of a stupid finish. And obviously the crowd knew what happened, but I'm not sure people actually buy it as a quality finish. They just knew that's what happened, and then getting the pin was going to happen from there. But I'm not sure. I'm really torn on this one. I don't like the finisher personally. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but it is what it is. One funny thing is when the show was ending, either somebody had their headphones up really loud or there was some crosstalk in there. You could actually hear the producer counting down to get out of the show. Just something I noticed on the playback. Okay, so this card was actually pretty good. I didn't really have a problem with any of the matches, except I was not a fan of the Dark Order Best Friends match. All the other matches were definitely good to great. I think one thing that was the problem with this card was the match order. I think, well, one, I would personally toss the Dark Order Best Friends match or replace the Dark Order because they're just falling flat. But the problem is because of the Young Bucks Lucha Bros match right before Jericho Hangman, it made Jericho Hangman feel a little flat, even though it was a good match. But the massive spectacle that happened right beforehand kind of dampened the excitement for that match. But I can't think of a really good way to reorder this match. Some people were saying, well, why didn't you put the tag titles on last? You knew this was going to happen. But the biggest thing is, one, this is an AEW show, and they're crowning their first world champion, and you don't want to put anybody else's titles higher than your own. So putting the AAA tag titles on last really would make no sense as far as that goes. So should the ladder match have gone earlier in the show? Probably. I mean, the best I could come up with is put the ladder match on second before Kenny and Pac. Because Kenny and Pac, I don't think would have a problem with their match feeling like it was going to fall flat. Or what you do is you do the ladder match second, and then you do the Cracker Barrel Clash after that, and then you do Omega Pac, and then continue on in the order that you were. But really, it's hard to figure out how to do this because of the quality of the matches leading up and throughout the night to the main event. I don't know how they could have restructured this to make the main event feel a little bit more exciting, even though it was a good match. And there was really nothing wrong with it at all. It is just the spectacles before it, and the story and emotion out of the Cody Spears match before the Bucks match. It's just, they were kind of in a tough spot, and really I cannot figure out a good way to rearrange this card. There probably would be some way to rearrange this card a little bit, or push one of these matches off and shorten the length of the show a little bit. This was a long show, including the pre-show, which had one important match on it, which was the Casino Royale, which was going to determine who's going to be fighting for the women's championship match, and Angelico and Jack Evans versus Private Party. So those two matches were on the pre-show, but including the pre-show, this whole show was 5 hours long. So it was 10 matches, 5 hours. So I don't know if some of these matches were even needed for this show. You probably could have pushed the Darby Allin, Joey Janela, Jimmy Havoc match. That probably didn't need to be on this show. And you could probably have scrapped the Best Friends Dark Order match, and you shorten the show by about an hour, and then you might have something to work with, rearranged a little bit. So dump those two matches, move Riho and Shida to the fourth match total on the card, and then then I think you'd be okay continuing the order. So instead it would be the Casino Royale, Jack Evans, Angelico, Private Party, then SCU versus Jurassic Express, put then Riho Shida there, and then continue on Omega Pac, Cody and Spears, Lucha Bros Young Bucks, and then the main event. It might have made it a little better, or maybe switch Young Bucks and Omega Pac. I don't know. It was just they're kind of in a rock and a hard place as far as this goes. So we'll see how it goes going forward. It sounds like they want to continue coming back to the Chicago, or at least Illinois, for the Labor Day weekend. It sounds like they want to kind of make this into a yearly thing. So they want to do the Sears Center every Labor Day weekend. They want to go back to Illinois for what is now going to be the night before Thanksgiving. They're going back to Chicago once again. And then they want to continue doing the Memorial Day weekend show out in Las Vegas. So it sounds like they want to make some annual rituals that they do, and they go back to the kind of the same places. Las Vegas, they have a ton of venues to choose from, so probably, hopefully, as AEW grows, they'll have a better pick and maybe some better perks to get into some of these places and not pay as much, because last I heard, Las Vegas can be expensive to rent places out to run shows, so they need to make sure they sell out and all that fun stuff. And then coming back to Chicago in that quick succession, I don't know how it's going to work year after year, because if they come back to Chicago on Labor Day and then come back before Thanksgiving every single year, I mean, you're looking at less than a 3-month span. Actually, it is about 3-month span, hitting Chicago twice with 2 big shows each year. I guess it depends, because it's going to be a regular TNT show, the night before Thanksgiving. So I guess it's slightly a different show, but if they're going to want to draw Chicago heavily a couple times, I don't know how many times a year they're going to go to Chicago, but it sounds like they're going to hit Chicago pretty hard, considering how well they've done in that area. And hopefully we'll see on some of the other places as well how their ticket sales go and whatnot. So I haven't checked on any of the ticket sales recently, but obviously Boston sold out, DC sold out, and Philadelphia sold out. I'm not sure on the rest of them. I'll have to check at some point. But so there you go. Going forward, we're going to start TV for AEW in October, and we're going to see how they're going to fill 2 hours a week with their roster. One thing I really hope I see is I was a big fan of how they did their YouTube videos for the Road to All Out. They did great promos and vignettes and whatever you want to call them, just videos. They had Cody doing his daily routine, working out, running with the dog, kind of telling that backstory. And I really hope they continue to do promos like this on their TV show. They film stuff outside of the arena. They film stuff on location at various different places. If they're only going to be doing TV once a week and they're not going to be doing house shows or anything, they have those other 6 days to do stuff with their talent, filming wherever where they live, or somewhere nearby in the city that they're going to, or they can arrive a day early and film stuff around the city that they're in, or leave a day late and do stuff. I think it would be great if they make sure they continue to do these types of video packages and stay and not do so much in arena stuff. Because basically you look over at the competition at WWE, all their promos, all their vignettes take place inside the arena that they're at, even if they're trying to make it look like something else. I haven't watched WWE in quite a long time, but I hear there's something about going to a gynecologist's office with Maria, and they just made up a room inside the arena to look like something, and I hear it looked like crap. So this is the stuff that they should be avoiding, and they should, unless it needs to be in the arena, go film it somewhere else. Because stuff happens that pushes stories along outside of the arena. It's like, why? Okay, these people come together, and it's only during the few hours that they're in this arena that you can push stories. No, you should be doing it outside. And the Sean Spears stuff where he goes into the office to sign the contract for Cody, and Tully's there and they're negotiating with the AEW management and whatnot, and they're going back and forth with their demands and everything like that. And Cody just walks in, signs it without reading, and leaves, and they're like, "Do you want to even read?" He's like, "Nah." And stuff like that. That is the stuff I want to be seeing. I don't want them setting up these stupid, contract signings in the middle of the ring that always ends with someone going through a table or anything like that. They're just so predictable and way overplayed, and there's no reason to have a contract signing in front of the crowd. Stuff like that. It just makes no sense, because that's not what happens in sports anyways, and this is supposed to be a simulated sport. So you should not be doing things that make absolutely no sense in a sports context. You would never have, the UFC is not going to drag two competitors out to the middle of the cage on a event leading up to their event to sign a contract. It's just ridiculous. They film their vignettes. They have their little sit-down interview type deals. They film their various stories and put them together, and it's all outside of the arena, because that's what makes sense. That's where they are 95% of the time. 90% of their week is spent outside of the wrestling arena, because they're only there during the show, and then they go home and do whatever. So that's where the stories should be taking place, and they shouldn't need to rely on them being in the arena to push stories forward. I believe they should start using those 6 days that they are not wrestling and they're not doing TV or anything to work with the talent, to do promos and vignettes and all that stuff, and really push characters forward instead of kind of last minute trying to do it in the arena with 2 hours notice and spend that time and craft a good story and get the good videos and just make a much more coherent product is really all they need to do. The talent that they have, the matches are going to be there. Now it's just how do they present the stories and the stuff that happens outside of the ring that pushes the stories forward. So there we go. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. This has been my review of the AEW All Out pay-per-view from 2019 before they go into TV. I'll see you guys next time on That's Wrestling. That's Wrestling. That's Wrestling. That's Wrestling.